If you are a speech language pathologist, an SLPA, an SALT, or some other alphabet soup doing speech therapy with kids, and you are stressed out and you are overwhelmed, then you are not alone and you are in the right place. There are so many kids right now that need our support, and there are not enough of us to go around. So what's an SLP to do? Well, don't worry, I'm Carrie Clark, and on this episode of the Speech and Language Kids podcast, I'm going to show you the way to be unstressed, just like a schwa, and to do speech therapy without tears. And by that I mean your tears, not your students' tears, because I can't guarantee that the kids won't cry. But this is our first podcast recording that we are doing for the Speech and Language Kids podcast in a long, long while. I was just looking on the podcast list, and it looks like the last time we updated this podcast was in 2016. But of course, that does not mean that I have been gone or missing. I have been doing all kinds of other things in that time. We had multiple different podcasts that we did during that time, as well as YouTube videos and social media channels and all kinds of other stuff. But today we're back. I have decided that I want to get back into doing the podcast, and I decided to go back to the Speech and Language Kids podcast because I really feel like it had the vibe we need right now, which is I'm going to share all this amazing information with you guys for free. And if you need extra support, I have all kinds of resources to help you. But I want to make sure I can get this information out because, like I said, there are so many children right now who need our support. And there's not enough speech language professionals to go around. So we're seeing parents trying to fill in the gaps, teachers trying to fill in the gaps, and those of us who are speech language professionals trying to go above and beyond and see way more kids than is even physically possible. And how do we do all this in a way that doesn't just drive us into the ground and burn us out? So today I'm going to be talking about this idea of how do we do speech therapy in the least stressful way possible. We're going to talk about streamlining and simplifying what you're doing so that you can be as effective as possible in as little time as possible with as little stress as possible. Okay, so I am actually right now doing this recording inside the Hub, which is my membership program. So hi to Karen and Susanna and Cindy and Anna Catherine. I see you all in here watching live, and Kusala, hello. So those of you who are with me live, you can go ahead and ask questions in the chat, and I'll be answering those as we go along. And if you are listening this recording somewhere else and you are interested in listening and participating in our podcast recordings live, you can do that at hub.speechandlanguagekids.com. Now, we're going to do some giveaways here in just a few moments. I'm going to tell a story first. But if you are watching live, you're going to get to participate in a giveaway. And if you are listening to the recording, you will also get to participate. So stick around. Okay. So I wanted to tell this story about one of the things I've been doing in the last however many years it's been since we updated the Speech and Language Kids podcast. And one of those things was that I got to partner up with my good friend Laura, and we got to go take care of a school district that was about an hour from where we live. It is a rural school district, and it was a school district who did not have a speech language pathologist up until a few years ago. And part of that reason was that we had a law in Missouri where you could have a speech, what were they called? It wasn't an SLPA, it was an implementer, I think was what it was called. So there was a speech language pathologist that was overseeing things, but all of the therapy and the ins and outs were run by the implementer. So the law changed and they needed an SLP. My friend Laura grabbed me and said, hey, I need to go see this school district, come with me, and we'll get them all sorted. So it's an entire school district. We went there one day a week, and we stayed there for the full school day, and we saw every student in the entire school district in one day, the two of us. So keep in mind, it was a smaller school district, so this was actually possible, but it was a job. And one of my favorite things about that thing that I did with Laura was that we got to ride to and from together and chat the whole way. And she had this little car called the Spark. It was the name of the car. And so we called it the Sparkler. And we would drive in the Sparkler. And we had so many amazing conversations in the Sparkler about, okay, how do we do this? How do we take this school district that, let's be honest, the IEPs were all over the place. The Paperwork was a hot mess. We weren't sure which kids needed therapy and which really didn't need to be in anymore. How do we take this whole school district, streamline it down so that 2 people could support all the kids that need our support in one day? Because it was too far for us to drive more than once. And it was also in such a rural area that there wasn't someone else there. So from our Sparkler visits, from our Sparkler car rides, we came up with so many amazing ideas. And a lot of that, I was able to use what I had learned in other settings and in other schools and come up with a more formulaic way to describe my process and how I do speech therapy and how I do it in as least a stressful manner as possible. And I have put all that together into one very systematic way of thinking about it and of doing it. And I have called it The Way. And that's partly because my brain couldn't come up with a more clever name. But also, it's just simply the way I do things. This is the way I do therapy. This is the way I save my sanity and the way I do self-care in every moment of my job by not overextending, by not spending time on things that don't actually move the needle. So we're going to go over the way today. I'm going to give you a big overview. And then over the next several podcast episodes, I will actually dive into each of these ideas in more depth. But we also have all of this information inside the hub. So if you go to hub.speechandlanguagekids.com, you can find all of this in depth with the handouts and the printouts and the different pieces that will actually help you put this together. Okay, one moment. Clear my throat. Okay, so let's do a giveaway. I am live inside the hub right now. I see a whole bunch of you in here. Hello and welcome. So those of you who are in the hub with me right now, listening to this recording, you are going to get to enter into our first giveaway just for being here, so don't leave. And then I have a giveaway for those of you who are listening to the recording after the fact as well. So today for our giveaway, we are going to be giving away 1 grade level of the core language program. This is my 16-week oral language intervention that will walk you through exactly how to teach all of the oral language skills in 1 grade level in 16 weeks. It's got worksheets, it's got a workbook where you work through it, and it teaches all of those skills. So the 2 people that are going to win, I'm going to contact you, and you are going to let us know which grade level you want, and we'll get you that for free. Okay, so those of you who are watching with me in the live inside the hub, hey Margaret, hey Madeline. All right, so we're gonna go do this. It's gonna be a random drawing, and one of you is gonna win 1 grade level in the hub. Here we go, ready? Donna Wirt, you are the winner. Congratulations, Donna. I will be emailing you to get you that. And then if you are listening to this podcast somewhere else, after the fact, I want to give you guys a chance to win a level of the core language program as well. And so the way we're going to do this is all you have to do is leave a review of the podcast on iTunes. So you can log into iTunes, go to the iTunes website, find the Speech and Language Kids podcast, and leave us a review. Once this first episode has gone live and we've given it a couple days, then I will go ahead and I will randomly select one of the reviews from the Speech and Language Kids podcast from this most recent go, so the last couple weeks, and that person will win. We'll reach out to you and get you a free level of the core language program as well. So go ahead and do that. All right, so let's jump into the way. If you are with me live inside the hub, go ahead and type your questions into the chat, and I will take those as we go along. And we're going to talk about the different aspects of the way. And this took me a while to kind of get down onto paper because there are so many things that I do that I don't even think about, that it really took me systematizing this and thinking through and answering questions to think about, okay, this is the way I do it. This is the easiest way to get set up doing it. And this is how I'm saving myself time and stress. So here are the different aspects. Obviously, these we can go into way more depth on these on future podcast episodes, but I want to give you the overview now. And then if you are feeling impatient and you don't have time to wait for the next podcast episodes to release, you can head over to the hub and you can get all of the information in there. Okay, so the very first thing that the way is kind of based on is this idea of no prep therapy. So I know we have all learned how to do lesson plans. We've all figured out how to sit down and say, okay, we need to work on this skill, and here's an activity that will work on it. We go to Teachers Pay Teachers. We find a cutesy little activity. We print it out. We laminate it. We cut out the pieces. And then we do that for 78 kids that are on our caseload, right? Okay, maybe not. That's not reasonable. So what I started doing when I was feeling overwhelmed was started doing no prep therapy. And that meant I picked what skill we were going to work on, and that was all the prep I did. I just assumed we would do child-led therapy when I walked in the door. So how does that look? How does that work? So basically, you're going to pick the skill that you want to work on for that child, that session. You're going to know that you have some sort of stimulus material, whether it's a worksheet or your Artic cards or something that's going to help you teach that skill if you need it. And then you're going to let the child choose an activity from your shelf. Maybe it's a game, maybe it's a craft, maybe it's a play activity like playing with dolls or playing house or playing with cars or trains. You're just going to let them pick something that they want to do, and then you're going to work on that skill during the session. And I know that sounds so much easier said than done, but that's one of the things that we talk about inside the hub is how do we do this? And I will have episodes on that idea of how do we do no prep therapy for this skill or that skill. But here's kind of the way it works for me. I like to have therapy folders, and that is basically just a file box with hanging folders, and inside the hanging folders are an individual file folder for each child. Not anything fancy, just a manila folder with their name on it. And I let them decorate the cover, make it pretty, whatever. But then when I am planning, I say, okay, I want to work on R with this kid and initiating interactions. That's a terrible combo. You would probably not be working on those two skills, but let's go with it. So those are the two I picked. So then I'm just going to grab something that will work on R, so a worksheet full of R words, and I'm going to grab a social story on initiating interactions, drop them in the folder, and then I am set for that student. Now, if you're wondering how would I find things like that, those are also in the hub, but that's what I do. And so then I have a box. Every kid has a folder. Every folder has one or two little pieces in it that they're going to be working on. And I keep those same skills for 1 month. So I plan once for a month, and I do the same thing over and over again for a full month. Because if you start to think about your students, your caseload, how often do you get through so many skills in a month that you need to be changing skills every week? Probably not that much. Our students don't make such fast progress that 1 week and we're done with R, and now we're working on S, and now we're done with S and we're going to work on T or whatever. We usually have to work on things for a while before they stick, right? And so if you plan for that, if you say, okay, I could do the same thing for a month, and that saves you planning time, that saves you prep time. And then that stimulus material, whatever you threw in the folder, the worksheet with the pictures or the social story or whatever it was, that one activity or material can be used over and over again the whole month. And the way you keep them from being bored is by letting them pick the game or the toy that you're playing with while you do it. Okay, so let me give an example. So let's say we are working with a little one on asking for help. So we're working on functional communication, and we have lots of toys in our room. We know that we're going to be working on help. So maybe we've just grabbed a piece of paper that has a help icon on it that we can use as a visual aid, drop that in their folder. So here comes Johnny. He comes into the room. I grab his folder because Johnny's 4 and he doesn't actually care about his folder. That's fine. The older kids get their folders out and they start working. But we're giving an example for a little one. So I'm going to grab his folder so I have that help picture. And then I'm going to say, what do you want to do today, Johnny? Let's pick something. And I let him pick something off the shelf. And then we sit down to play, and I pay attention to what Johnny is interested in. Let's say Johnny's really enjoying putting the marbles down the marble track. So we build the track, and when they get stuck, I'm saying help, and I'm showing him the picture. And then we do a couple marbles, and then I take the marbles and I stick them in an empty peanut butter jar and I screw the lid on and I set that in front of us. Now he can't get the marbles out to put them down the track. And he tries for a little bit, and then he starts to get frustrated. And then I model help, and then he hopefully says help, and then I help him open it, and we do that. And so we're working it into the activity. Now, let's say you have a group full of older students. That's a different example, right? So let's say we have a group of second graders. They're working on speech sounds. This is our TIC group, but they're all working on different speech sounds. So my second graders start filing into the room. I say, grab your folders and have a seat. They find their folder on the way in. They sit down at the table, open up their folder. And I say, okay, start practicing your words. The page on top is the words that they've been working on. So they are supposed to, and they have done this before, so they know what they're doing. They sit down at the table as everyone's coming in, and they're just practicing their words quietly to themselves. I am monitoring and helping them, remember, like this, and I'm giving them the prompts. I'm showing them how to do it as they're all practicing simultaneously. Maybe we need to spread them out a little bit, but they're working on that for a little while until they start to get squirrely, and I say, okay, time to grab a game. And I let them pick a game, and we spend a couple minutes negotiating which game we're going to play, because let's be honest, that's an amazing social skill that all children need to practice, is negotiation. And then we come to the table and I say, okay, before your turn, you're going to tell me 5 of your words, and then you can take your turn. So I go to Sarah and I say, do 5 of your words. I give her some feedback. I help her correct the productions. And then while she's taking her turn in the game, I'm moving on to Beth. Beth says 5 of her words. Then she takes her turn while I move on to Abby. And then I go back to Sarah. And so that's how that can look as well. Okay. Again, I'm going to go into way more depth on all of this, but I wanted to give you the big picture, right? So we're talking about no prep therapy. We're talking about setting up our folders once a month and letting that go. We're talking about how to do child-led therapy, where they are picking the activity and we are working on the skills through those activities. The next thing that I think is super, super key to my way. And now if you were dozing off, if you were zoning out, come back. This one's really important. You ready? The 5-minute sessions. Okay, this is one that made a huge difference when I was working in that rural school district. The idea of the 5-minute session is that instead of seeing a group of, let's say, 3 kids for 30 minutes together, you see each of them for 5 minutes individually. All right? The research on this is insane. When you look at the actual studies that have been done comparing 5-minute individual to 30-minute groups, the kids in these studies, and you can, we should have show notes. I'll have a show notes page if you go to speechandlanguagekids.com/unstressed, UNSTRESSED, unstressed. If you go to that website, I will have a link to this research. But the kids that did 5-minute sessions were dismissed in half the time, 9 months versus 18 months, in far fewer minutes out of class, because they were only coming to speech. I think the average was 5 minutes, 7 times a month. So that's just a couple a week, right? Less than 2 a week. Versus 7 30-minute sessions a month. So the kids missed less class time, were dismissed in half of the time in terms of how many months they were in therapy, and were able to get in more repetitions per session in an individual 5-minute than in a group. Okay, so here's how this looks. I'm going to give you an example here too. So with my rural school, I was only there 1 day a week, right? But I wanted to get 2 5-minute sessions for these kids. So I had, I think, 10 kids that I was seeing for 5-minute sessions. Some of them were RTI, some of them were full IEP. And I would block out an hour of my morning right when I got there and block out an hour at the end of the day. And I would go around to their different classrooms and I would see each of them for 5 minutes. So I would come in to Miss Sarah's class and I would say, Miss Sarah, I need Johnny. Johnny comes out, stands right out in the hallway. Maybe we sit on the ground, but we're right outside the door. We're not leaving. We're not traveling anywhere because that takes too much time. And then we are going to drill for 5 minutes. It's only 5 minutes. I don't need a game. I don't need to do all the bells and whistles. I just say, we're going to work on this for 5 minutes and then you go back to class. If I start to lose their attention, I show them the timer and I say, oh, only 2 more minutes, let's do it. If I'm really losing their attention, I say, okay, the next 5 you have to do while standing on 1 foot. And we stand on 1 foot. And then I say, the next one you have to do in downward dog position. And we get into downward dog on the floor, and then we do more words. So anything that you can do drill and practice works so well for this 5-minute approach. Okay, Karen's asking where to get the show notes. Great question, Karen. speechandlanguagekids.com/unstressed. That one is not active yet, Karen, because I haven't put it together yet. But since you are inside the hub right now, there is also information on the 5-minute approach inside the hub. So I'll show you where that is as well. Okay. So back to this 5-minute approach. So I see the kid, 5 minutes, my timer goes off, I send them back to class, I grab the next one. Once I hit everyone in that classroom, I go to the next classroom. And within an hour, I can get 10 kids in 5 minutes each. You know, there's a couple of, a little bit of time in between each one for our transition between the 2 kids. But I can get a lot of kids done in that hour. And then I went back and did the same thing at the end of the day. So those kids got 2 5-minute sessions a week, but they were both on the same day. And I tell you what, those kids that were doing the 5-minute sessions made so much faster progress than my kids in groups. It was crazy. And that's what other people are seeing too, and that's what the research is showing. So like I told Karen, that's inside the hub. There's a whole section on 5-minute speech and how to do it, what apps I use to make it easy for me, and all of that. So that's in there. We will do an episode of the podcast on 5-minute sessions as well. But if you need that information right now, you can go to hub.speechandlanguagekids.com. Okay, I love this. We're at 20 minutes. I want to try to keep these to 30 minutes or less. So I'm just going to kind of touch on the last ones so that you know what's coming. And so you know that those are in the hub, and then we'll go in depth later. Okay, so the last ones, data. Let's talk about data. So data collection is one that we often get hung up on. And my big thing on data collection is that most of the time, we do not need to be collecting data on every single repetition that a child does. We don't need to collect data on every time they say their sound or practice their skill. I do like to collect what I call full data, where I am collecting it on every repetition for an amount of time. I like to do that once a month. And that goes right in line with my planning once a month. So I will sit down, usually mine is the last week of the month, and I say, okay, this is our data week. And I am going to, we're going to get 20 reps. I'm going to collect data on each one so that I can actually take a percentage and see how we're doing, see if we're ready to move on to a new skill for next month or if we need to stick with this one. And that gives me that full data. But I only do that once a month. Every other time I see that student that month is a therapy day. And on my therapy days, I only collect one piece of data, and that is on a scale of 1 to 5, how did they do on that skill today? So 5 would be they did it every time without any prompting or help. 1 would be they didn't do it even though I prompted and helped the crap out of them. Excuse my language. And then, 3 would be they did it about half the time, or they needed, moderate amounts of support. So you can come up with what that 1 to 5 is, and then you can use that for your data point. I also will sometimes jot a quick note about which prompts I used or what, level of the skill we were on, something just to help me. But the data I take is that 1 to 5. Okay. And Margaret asked, I'm so glad you did, Margaret. Margaret just asked, how does that work for Medicaid billing? Okay. Now, I am not a Medicaid billing expert, so please, please, please check with your organization. I have heard different things from different Medicaid reps or different billing companies, so it does change depending on where you are. But by and large, I have been told that 1 through 5 is a numeric data point. So you could say 4 out of 5 is an 80%. 3 out of 5, you just calculate the percentage of that. It's a 3 out of 5. And that has worked for some Medicaid billing. Obviously, it's not going to work for everybody. But the key is if they say no to that, so you try that and they say, no, that's not going to work. If they say no to that, then you say, okay, what is the minimum amount of data I do need? Could I just take data on 5 reps? And that would be my data. And then the rest of your session is no data, where you're really focusing on the therapy. You're focusing on helping them get to that next level of production. Does that help, Margaret? Does that answer your question? Okay, so again, we'll do more on data and that piece of it. The other part of the way that I talk about a lot inside the hub is the admin tasks. So this is doing your paperwork, doing your billing, doing your IEPs or your evals or your progress notes and all of that. And we really talk about how to streamline those tasks and how to systematize those tasks so that not only are you doing the least amount of work to meet those requirements in an effective way, but you're also finding ways to shortcut. So maybe you are coming up with, there are software tools that will allow you to type a shortcut and then it pops in the full text. So if you're always saying the same thing over and over again, every time you write a report, this test does this and it's blah, 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 blah. Whatever that blurb is, you could save that and have a shortcut so that when you write, let's say, SLPA report and then hit space, it fills in that full text bubble. So there are ways to save you time that way. And then we also talk about how to set up a checklist of here's all the steps to completing an eval. Here's all the steps to making an IEP or doing my progress notes. And then using that checklist to keep yourself on task and to know where you were in case you have to stop and start again, which we all do because we have a million things we're doing, right? So we have some blank checklists for IEPs, evals, and progress notes inside the hub on the way section, so you can grab those as well. We also talk about how to write your goals in a way that is streamlined and easier to take data on. I'm a big fan of rubric style goals. And that would be, again, where you say, okay, by the end of the IEP cycle, student will achieve a 4 out of 5 or better on the following rubric. And then you actually just lay out what that looks like for that skill. And then finally, we're going to talk about how to get your stuff organized, your physical stuff. And that has a lot to do with streamlining down so that you're decluttering and then prioritizing putting things away versus getting them out. And I know I need to finish because we're almost at 30 minutes. But what I mean by that is if you need to get something out, you're going to take the extra 2 steps to go get it from across the room because you need it. If you are putting something away, you might not take the extra 2 steps because you don't need to put it away right now. You could do that later, right? So that prioritizing putting it away means just put it in a place, store it in a place where you're going to be when you're done with it instead of where you're going to be when you start the activity. So anyway, we'll talk about that too. Okay, I'm going to stop. There was so much, but like I said, if you would like to check out The Way, right now we have that as a course. You can go through and watch the videos. You can print out the handouts. You can print out those checklists and the cheat sheets and all of those things inside the hub. So that is hub.speechandlanguagekids.com. The first 3 modules of that are available to the free membership. So you can check it out for free. Just sign up for the freebies plan when you're in checkout. And then if you decide you do want to keep going and see the rest of the content, then you can access that by upgrading to the full hub membership, which is only $25 a month. So that's an option. Or hang tight because this podcast we are going to release all of the information in podcast format so you can listen to it over the next several weeks. So make sure you subscribe to the podcast. All right, the other thing I want you to do before you see me again is go to make a review of the podcast on iTunes. Remember, we're going to be doing a giveaway for one person who reviews us on iTunes. So make sure you go in there and do that review, and that will enter you automatically into our giveaway for 1 grade level of the core language program, which is our 16-week oral language intervention. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this. Oh, I did have one more question from the hub. Where did that go? I lost my mouse. There it is. I had a question from the hub, and I wanted to answer this because I think this is incredibly relevant to what we're doing. So this was from Susanna, and Susanna said, how can I best manage admin, resource making, universal level provision, etc., as the only speech and language therapist in a special school? It can be a bit overwhelming to be the only SALT working in the school. SALT is the abbreviation in the UK for speech therapists, just like we use SLP in the US. Okay, I love this question because this is exactly what we're talking about. when we look at all the things that we need to do, or that we even just feel like we need to do, it can be incredibly overwhelming, and there's not enough time in the day to get it all done. So by focusing on those things that really make the most difference, that really move the needle for our students, we can eliminate some of those things that we were doing that are maybe nice to do, or we felt like maybe it was something we should do, but that aren't really making the most impact on our clientele. Because here's the key. We're not superheroes. We all wish we were, we want to be, but we can't do it all. We can't do the job of 4 people, right? So being able to say, okay, what's the bare minimum that needs to be done to make this effective? How do we streamline that? How do we find these shortcuts? And then once we have that baseline, once we have all of our basic needs met for our students, for our job, for us, then we can say, oh, that freed up time for this other piece. Oh, maybe now I could add a few more of this thing in, right? Or maybe I can do those fun things I like coming up with themed activities for holidays. When we are so overwhelmed, we don't have the space to do that. So that is what the way is all about. I am going to help you streamline, simplify, make it easier so that you are able to love what you do and help all of the many, many students that you want to help. So until next time, please stick around, head over to the hub and say hi, leave a review on the podcast, subscribe to the podcast so you get the next ones, and we're just going to keep going. I love this. I'm so excited to be back, and I'm glad to have you here as well. All right, thank you all so much. Have a wonderful day. Bye.